Imagine your company is no longer waiting on the utility, no longer exposed to transmission bottlenecks, no longer at the mercy of the grid. You're in control. That's the next frontier of large organizations, energy independence.
Today on Wired for Power, we're showing you exactly how enterprises are making that shift. From generation and storage on site to data systems to smart finances and infrastructures, because the grid, well, it's not holding up.
This is Wired for Power, where the energy of ideas meets the force of execution. Let's get to work!
All right, welcome back to Wired for Power. I'm Amorah Sandberg, Head of Business Development here at Power.
And I'm Dustin Markowski. In this episode, we're tackling what energy independence really means for large organizations and how you get there.
So, with a grid under pressure, prices all over the place, and infrastructure getting riskier, the companies that are taking control are the ones that will win. And we're here to show you how.
All right, so let's start by defining it. When you hear energy independence, you might be picturing being completely off grid, but that's not what we're actually talking about.
Right. So for enterprises, independence means generating power where it's actually used, right? So storing it smartly, managing it intelligently. So that's kind of the apps and all the tech you get with that. And then dramatically reducing the dependence on the utility grid and external risk. So not completely off of it. It's just how do we manage that?
Yeah, it means control, budget certainty, operational resilience, and in many cases, a competitive advantage.
So let's throw out an example of this. Like if your data center can supply 30% of its load, let's say, you're no longer just a customer, right? You're becoming almost like a mini power plant.
Yep, that's exactly right. And I think data centers are a really good one for us to look at. Not only are we seeing the number of data centers and plans for data centers increasing across the United States, we're seeing that the demand for them also increasing even beyond what's already kind of scheduled to be built. So AI obviously leading a big part of that, but we're also seeing mining being another big portion of that demand coming through as well.
And the sheer power that they need, like it's insane how
Yeah,
much that they're going to need to pool. So taking over, in the example, 30% is actually a pretty big deal.
yeah, yeah, it really is. So let's talk about the problem. Okay, so we've actually, I think, tackled this in a previous episode, but more specifically on how this is going to relate to us. Several studies show that the U.S. grid is aging, it's underinvested. Right, the replacement value, I think, on the electric grid right now is kind of estimated somewhere around like $4.8 trillion, and that's just kind of for where we're at today.
Yeah, and like Bloomberg and something that we mentioned in our last podcast, they're estimating or indicating that it's actually 21 trillion in grid investments that is actually needed by 2050. And what this will do is help support us to net zero pathways.
Yeah,
So it's a long time. It's a lot of money
and
to get there.
and a lot of these estimates, right, are pre AI boom,
Right.
and pre mining boom, even really.
Right.
Yeah, there's always been interest in mining over the last 5 to 10 years, but it's really started to increase dramatically over the last 1 to 2 as we start to see six figures in valuation for Bitcoin.
Right.
So, domestically, I would say other reports are showing that grid modernization alone could probably run up into the multiple trillions. The U.S. investment needs in order to modernize and expand the grid are estimated at about $25 trillion by the middle of the century.
So what does this mean for businesses, enterprises? I think it really means continue exposure to transmission delays,
Yeah.
distribution upgrades, utility rate increases, and reliability risk. That's really a lot that can affect a business And really kind of goes back to the dollar. If you're a manufacturing company and you can't put something out there because you don't have power, you're a food supply company now. Your food is no longer stored safely. So how many millions of dollars did you lose with that? So just being reliant on that and the exposure to that risk is scary.
Yeah, I mean, think about it, right? Like you want to add on an additional production line,
Yeah.
and your utility company is telling you somewhere between 12 to 36 months before they can supply you that additional power.
Yeah.
Your growth is now completely in the hands of your utility.
Right.
Now, maybe that's okay. Maybe you're looking at increased production over the next 10 to 20 years, and that's okay. But at the same time, sometimes you need to move when you need to move. And being able to do it in a much shortened time frame, being able to do it under 12 months, under 6 months even, right? That's what we're talking about. Energy independence, putting the control back in your hands. So
Totally.
I think a special report that I read, it was noted the U.S. grid is a kind of a bottleneck really to renewables and EV growth just because of the cost and infrastructure constraints alone, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's because like enterprises are increasing their load in general. We got what we just talked about, data centers, EVs.
Yeah.
Like the EV load alone is forecasted to add between 100 and 185 terawatt hours by 2030 in the United States. So all those factors, and then we have AI, and then we have mining, and we have so many other things. The strain just kind of gets worse over time.
And I mean, and if we think about it too, the backup model, right, for a lot of enterprises right now is, they have backup generators. They might have ways of making sure that their current production, doesn't go down, right?
Yeah.
Like as we've talked with folks, and we say like, hey, being down for an hour could mean 1, 10, $20 million in production potentially. And so it could have massive impact, right, to your business operations. And as we're seeing the grid can having an increasing number of interruptions to power throughout the year, right? That's, if you have 5 times where power goes down and it's on average at 2 to 3 hours, right? And then what does that end up meaning? That could be tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars for your business. So, okay, we have a backup option. We have a backup plan for that. We have some resiliency backup, and most of that is generators, right? And generators are fine. It's a good backup option when you need a lot of power for a short period of time.
Yeah.
The problem is that was designed to be a temporary issue in an event of an emergency,
Right.
not your normal day-to-day operations. So when you're a global organization and you have very specific ESG initiatives that you're trying to hit, right? Renewable targets, net carbon footprint reduction thresholds that you're trying to meet throughout the year. Well, now how do you plan for that? Well, the backup option, the emergency backup option, is no really longer something that you can rely on because it wasn't built to handle the day-to-day operations, which is what we're seeing them needed for.
Yeah. So then the solution.
Yeah.
What should they be looking at? What should any smart business that wants to kind of take back that control? What do you do?
Well, I mean, I think one of the big things to realize is the solution is definitely not waiting for the utility to fix its problems, right?
Right.
They are moving at a much slower pace. They have really big problems that they're trying to solve and fix. In regards to just much more larger regional and global issues. So the best thing you can do is really, how do we take that power into our own hands, right? So why don't we actually just kind of break down that model now?
So I think step one, for my opinion here, is on-site generation. So that's either whether it's on the rooftop of your building, a carport, ground-mounted solar. There's a lot of options of where you want to put these things, but it should be right where your energy is consumed. So like on your campus
Yeah.
is important.
Yeah, and there's a plethora of ways to do generation. One of the biggest reasons why solar, I think, is one of our favorites. It's so much more predictable. And yeah, are there things that can interrupt solar production? Absolutely. But that, again, we're not talking about being completely off grid. We're talking about having a majority of your power come from a place that's extremely predictable.
Right.
Wind energy becomes less and less predictable. We might have much larger understanding of the predictability of that generation over the course of a year or 5 years or 10 years, but on a day-to-day basis, it actually becomes much less predictable, whereas solar becomes one of the most predictable ways of producing energy on site, as we're talking about.
Totally. Love that.
Yeah. Step 2, I would say, is energy storage and management. So you can control when you use energy, when you can think about it, like if you are running a manufacturing line and you have massive demand needs at certain times in the day, of the week, of the month, or whatever, being able to supply that amount of energy is important. Store any surplus that you would have, right, at times where you have high generation and you have lower consumption of energy, so that you can use it when you do have higher times of consumption. And then overall, just create that same resiliency, right? Making sure that you have a supply when you can't rely on the grid being able to supply that for you.
And step 3, EMS, intelligent energy management systems, or really platforms where you can control and forecast and optimize your generation. So in the world of tech, yes, there is tech for this, right? Data, analytics, control. You will have access to all of those things. So making sure you have those systems set up so you can predict how much you're generating, and then what does that mean for your business, and does it mean we need more growth, more panels? Do we need more battery storage? Just being smart about it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. We've in one of our conversations with one of our customers early on, we were talking to them about, an energy management system for their organization, and their feedback was, well, we have a building management system. It controls exactly when the power needs to be to all the right places at all the right times. And so we said, well, we did it. We ran a trial, pilot program for them. And so when we did it, we said, hey, are you surprised if you are using a bunch of energy on the weekends, right? I think they had a couple of parking garages, right? And they're like, no, the power gets turned off from those because nobody's here on the weekends, and we don't need everyone to be running power for all of these thousands of parking spaces when nobody's there. And we said, we agree, but you are running power to those the same amount that you're running throughout the day on the weekends as well. And so our system was able to show them that, and they went in there and realized that, hey, their building management system was scheduled to have those things turn off, but it wasn't actually firing. And so this is where having, an EMS it's not about managing your building. It's really about understanding and being able to monitor and manage your entire resource platform. Yeah. So once you when we start thinking about how do we combine all this together, and that's microgrid, right? Building your own microgrid, your hybrid kind of infrastructure. And this is kind of what we've been alluding to all along, which is you take all of these components together. We use the grid as a partner in this, but it's no longer the primary, it's the secondary. And so we use it as a tool to help us manage everything else that we're doing, to help manage that we can meet demand when we need it, but it's not our primary source that we can rely on, right? Because we don't have full control over it. So you could kind of consider it like an enterprise campus power system, right? So solar, storage, backup, software.
Love it. Love it. And a real world example of this one, we worked with a large logistics facility just a few months ago, and they avoided, was it multi-million-dollar upgrade from the utility by just putting in solar and storage. I think they gained obviously the avoidance of a delay of getting that energy, and then they also have the resilience of being reliant on themselves and not worried about power outages and grid upgrades and all of that. So just kind of taking that power back to them.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, these guys had a brand new contract and customer that they had to go fulfill on. And their distribution centers had large upgrades that needed to happen that they could make happen. But if you don't have the power to support that, how much longer is that delay? And so being able to take that control, move it in your hands, and be able to do it on your timeline, right, allowed them to deliver and ultimately win that contract. So, yeah.
Cool.
I think the best part about this is, you're using your power where it's needed.
Yeah.
We're not transmitting it anymore. We don't have to worry about how a storm, 5, 10, 20 miles off is going to impact the support of our organization and what we're doing, because we have all the ability to do it on site.
Yeah. Love that. I think it's actually like probably important to kind of pivot a little bit and let's talk some of the financials, because I'm sure that's on everyone's mind. Is this super expensive? Those types of things. So, independence is obviously more than operational. It's going to be financial. So, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, when I talk with a lot of businesses,
Yeah.
there is and almost in every single budget, right? The world has become operationalized, and so everything is as a service, right? So we don't buy anything anymore. We lease everything. We lease software. We lease equipment. Like nothing's purchased anymore. And so many times I talk with folks, and they're like, "Hey, listen, I don't have room in my OpEx budget, but I actually have room in my CapEx budget. And,
Mm,
is there, what can we do with that?" And so if this is one of the nice things where you can actually take something that's been an operational expense, move it, basically take care of it through CapEx, and now massively reduce your operational expenses and actually create room in that budget should you need to. So it's a really great way if you're trying to move things around to be able to actually take and make budget room where you need it. Right now, that doesn't work for every business. And so many businesses are like, no, 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 we need to show this as an operational expense. And so the cool thing is there's ways to do that as well. Right. So through lending, through a lot of financial models and vehicles in the space, you can do it where you're keeping it still as an operational expense, which is pretty cool.
that's awesome. And then let's talk about budget certainty out of solar systems, right? Whether you're installing the system, you own it, you lease it, you know the cost at the end of the day, right? With utility, you're worried about spikes, demand charges. We hear about those every single day, and just having a uh, predictable cost that you're going to have every single month and having that stabilized, not dependent on what else is happening in the neighborhood, I think is a really big plus there and big bonus.
Yeah, like in especially in like deregulated markets, we see global enterprises negotiating for a lot of certainty as far as rates go, and they'll do that on a 5 or 10 year basis typically. So they'll know kind of over the next 5 to 10 years exactly what they're going to be paying for power, what those needs are, and they have that identified pretty well. Um, the the interesting thing that happens is one is we don't have dereg markets everywhere. Two, you're having to negotiate them for every single campus across all of those markets that you have it available in. And three, it is going to give you some certainty. It is going to probably give you some savings as well, because based on your buying power. But this is an area where not only can we actually bring down the cost, and if we look at the guaranteed cost over a period of time, usually that period of time is about 30 years in the commercial market.
Mm,
So if I can bring you certainty not for 5 or 10 years, but I can bring you certainty for 30 years,
yeah.
and I can make it a third or even a fourth of the cost of what you're negotiating paying now, you know, is it
Yeah.
going to work for everything? No, but if it can take a majority of it, if it can take 80% of that and you can spread it over those 30 years, now we're talking about giving you a whole lot more certainty and flexibility.
Absolutely. And then third, ESG and corporate reputation. So according to solar energy industry associations, corporate procurement accounts for 18% of U.S. solar capacity. This actually is showing a strong demand for businesses for clean generation in general.
Yeah, and what we end up seeing, right, is that's not just they're buying 18% of all of the solar systems or solar modules in the United States. What that really means is they are doing that to develop solar systems themselves, but they're also paying for renewable tariffs from the utility company directly, right? So, if I am like I need to have a green company, I need to have a certain amount of my power coming from renewable sources, they're going to pay for that tariff which ensures that, hey, certain amount of energy coming from your utility company that comes from renewable efforts is going directly to your business, right? And so a lot of times that's at a premium. One of the coolest things is when you do it on site, you can actually do it with the savings as well from it. So,
Mm, love that. Okay, and then like
yeah,
next one, we talked about this one earlier, but risk mitigation. This is
yeah,
a big one for us, right? So the grid goes down, your
yep,
enterprise gets to keep operating. Um,
yeah,
so that gives you kind of competitive protection in general.
yeah. If that line doesn't go down, you're not losing that amount of money in production, right?
Mhm.
If you can have a stronger uptime, you do have a stronger competitive advantage. So as we look at financial, and strategic advantages to do building your own microgrid in there, like risk mitigation, I think is one of the biggest ones to really consider.
Yeah, and then
So
yeah, and then lastly, on top of that is really the overall long-term value, right? So we know clean energy systems, what you just said a couple minutes ago, is it's a 25 to 30-year asset, right? That's how long these warranties are lasting. It's going to enhance your property value
yeah,
and serve as like a strategic differentiator for you and your business.
absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
all right, well, let's go into how we kind of begin this journey. So, if you want to start this transformation, let's kind of lay out some practical roadmap steps for our listeners.
Yeah, I would say, number one, and a lot of businesses have already done this and they understand this, and but it needs to be refreshed continually. And
Mm,
that is that you need to conduct an energy audit, right?
yep,
Understand your load, understand your cost drivers, demand charges, peak usage, right?
yeah.
And your site constraints specifically. Those things are going to be really, really key as to understand where the lay of the land is, so we know where can we start making an impact.
Yep. And like the next thing to really think about is like building out an independence roadmap. What is your target generation? When will storage add value? What's your control layer? So some of those things just to kind of think about as you're building out these systems is just be thoughtful about it and think about those things.
Yeah. Well, what are your initiatives? What are the goals that you guys have laid out internally too? And
Right.
is it even reasonable to be able to hit those milestones based on your current map?
And maybe you start small and kind of grow later, right? There's benefits to different approaches.
Absolutely. Step three, let's finance the project, right? We taking this from CapEx, we taking this from OpEx. We looking at lease options, PPAs, ownership models, understanding the different incentives and tax benefits, right? But it's really understanding, okay, cool, what is the actual impact to the business? Most of the times it's highly favorable, but you still need to understand what that looks like and make sure that you have the capacity to take that through.
Yep, and then, I think I mean, we kind of touched on this, but execute in phases. You don't need to take on the entire thing, like I get what we just said. So start with like your highest impact load areas, integrate storage along the way where like the demand charge is high. So like how do you offset those costs first and think about those areas first, and then build out solar across the campus, right? So kind of roll it out as it makes sense, but again, taking over those higher areas where those larger charges are that are affecting your business the most.
Yeah. And then maybe lastly is just what are some of the things that you want to avoid? So,
Right.
using disparate vendors with no unified platform or vision, I think is important. Make sure that you're working with somebody who can understand you all the way from audit to execution. Ignoring data and software, I think is also a big one.
Yeah.
Treating solar as kind of a one and done install rather than an infrastructure project for your business. And then failing to align all of the teams internally, right? Like, is finance involved? Is facilities involved? Is the ESG teams involved? How are we making sure that we're actually bringing in all of the teams in order to make sure that we're hitting all of the goals that we have across the entire enterprise?
Yeah, love it. So I think we're getting close to our end of our time, so maybe a quick recap will be good. I'll kind of start off, right? Independence isn't about unplugging. The utility still is going to have a role. It's really about taking charge and taking control back of what you can.
Yeah, you're reducing risk. locking in cost, gaining resiliency, and turning energy into kind of your strategic asset.
Yep. So if you are a enterprise with growth plans, you're going to have some large loads coming up. You have sustainability mandates. Now is the time to act. As we said in other podcasts, there are different incentives, and some go away in the future. Right? There's the doing things sooner rather than later is always better.
Yeah. Reach out to us at power.solar. We're happy to work with you and see if we can set up a time to do an enterprise energy independence audit. We can help you map that path.
Yep. And if you are a partner or an EPC interested in delivering independence for your clients, let's connect. We'll get you the framework, the tools, and the support needed to execute and make that happen. So um, thanks again. Make sure to subscribe and come back for future episodes.
Let's build something powerful.